What if I told you that the one move everyone's calling impossible could be exactly what transforms the Maple Leafs from playoff pretenders into Stanley Cup champions? And it all hinges on two simple words that have the hockey world buzzing. The NHL trade rumor mill never sleeps, but every so often, a story emerges that cuts through the noise like a siren in the night. Right now, that story revolves around a potential blockbuster that has analysts, former players, and fans divided down the middle. It's a trade scenario so audacious, so polarizing, that it's forcing everyone to ask the same fundamental question. Are the Toronto Maple Leafs brave enough to make the move that could define their entire championship window? At the center of this storm sits Erik Karlsson, three-time Norris Trophy winner, offensive dynamo, and quite possibly the most gifted puck-moving defenseman of his generation. The Pittsburgh Penguins want him gone. Toronto reportedly has interest, and suddenly everyone in hockey has an opinion about whether this marriage makes sense. When NHL analyst Jay Rosehill was presented with a mock trade scenario that would bring Erik Karlsson to Toronto, his response was immediate and unequivocal: all day. Those two words have ignited a firestorm of debate that reaches far beyond simple roster construction. They represent a philosophy, a willingness to embrace risk in pursuit of greatness that defines championship organizations. Rosehill's enthusiasm stems from a brutally honest assessment of Toronto's current situation. Nick Robertson, despite his obvious talent, appears to be a player without a natural fit in the Leaf system. Meanwhile, Morgan Reilly, making $7.5 million annually, has seen his production decline while defensive inconsistencies continue to plague his game. In Rosehill's view, these aren't insurmountable problems, they're opportunities disguised as obstacles. The logic is compelling in its simplicity. Karlsson, even at 34 years old, remains one of the few defensemen in the NHL capable of single-handedly transforming a power play. His 53 points in 82 games last season might not match his peak years, but they still represent elite offensive production from the blue line. More importantly, they represent exactly the type of production Toronto desperately needs as they potentially face life without Mitch Marner. Every great trade story has its complications, and this one comes loaded with them. The most obvious hurdle isn't salary cap mathematics or asset valuation, it's human nature. Morgan really possesses a no-movement clause, and by all accounts, he has zero interest in leaving Toronto. The defenseman has repeatedly expressed his desire to help the Maple Leafs win their first Stanley Cup since 1967, making him an unlikely candidate to facilitate his own departure. This creates a fascinating psychological chess match that extends far beyond hockey strategy. Would Reilly's competitive drive eventually override his emotional attachment to Toronto if he truly believed his departure could help the team win? Or would loyalty and personal preference trump championship aspirations? These are the kinds of questions that keep general managers awake at night and make or break franchise-defining moves. The financial reality adds another layer of complexity. Karlsson carries 2 years remaining on his massive 8-year, $92 million contract, though recent bonus payments have reduced his actual cap hit. Even with retention from Pittsburgh, acquiring Karlsson would require significant salary cap gymnastics that could limit Toronto's flexibility in other areas. Not everyone shares Rosehill's enthusiasm, and the opposition arguments carry significant weight. Leafs Nation analyst Michael Motze represents the cautious camp, arguing that the proposed trade packages simply don't provide sufficient value for Pittsburgh to part with their star defenseman. More fundamentally, he questions whether Karlsson represents the right fit for Toronto's championship timeline and roster construction. Motze's concerns extend beyond simple asset evaluation. He worries about Karlsson becoming a divisive figure among Leafs fans, acknowledging the complex relationship between elite talent and public perception. Toronto's fan base has endured decades of disappointment, creating an environment where every major move faces intense scrutiny and immediate judgment. The age factor looms large in these discussions. At 34, Karlsson is undoubtedly closer to the end of his career than the beginning. While his skill set suggests he could remain effective for several more seasons, Betting significant assets and cap space on a player entering his mid-30s represents exactly the kind of gamble that can either validate front office brilliance or expose organizational desperation. There's also the question of fit within Toronto's existing system. The Maple Leafs have built their identity around speed and skill, but they've also struggled with defensive consistency and playoff reliability. Adding another offensive-minded defenseman, regardless of his pedigree, might exacerbate existing weaknesses while failing to address core structural issues. Perhaps no aspect of this potential trade carries more immediate impact than its effect on Toronto's power play. Former Maple Leafs defenseman Carlo Koleakovo has emerged as one of Karlsson's strongest advocates, focusing specifically on the Swede's ability to quarterback man-advantage situations. In Koleakovo's view, this skill alone justifies the acquisition cost. The timing couldn't be more relevant. With Mitch Marner's future in Toronto uncertain and the team's power play success heavily dependent on his creativity and vision, adding Karlsson could provide insurance against offensive decline. The veteran defenseman's ability to create scoring chances from the point represents a different dimension than Toronto currently possesses. Last season, the Maple Leafs experimented with 5 forward power play units, a creative but ultimately limited approach that highlighted their lack of elite offensive defensemen. Karlsson's presence would fundamentally alter these dynamics, providing a true quarterback who could distribute the puck, create shooting lanes, and generate offense through both individual skill and system-wide improvement. The historical precedent supports this argument. Throughout his career, Karlsson has consistently elevated the performance of teammates through his playmaking ability and hockey intelligence. Players who might struggle to generate offense individually often thrive when playing alongside someone capable of creating time and space through elite puck movement. Every discussion about major trades ultimately returns to championship implications, and Toronto's window presents both urgency and opportunity. The core group of Auston Matthews, William Nylander, and potentially Mitch Marner represents elite offensive talent that won't remain together indefinitely. Adding a player of Karlsson's caliber could maximize the impact of this group while they're all in their prime. The psychological factor can't be understated either. Acquiring a 3-time Norris Trophy winner sends a message to both the locker room and the broader hockey world that Toronto is serious about winning now. After years of playoff disappointment, sometimes bold moves are necessary to break negative cycles and create new expectations. However, championship teams are typically built on a foundation of defensive reliability and playoff-tested veterans. Karlsson's defensive inconsistencies and limited recent playoff success raise legitimate questions about whether his skill set translates effectively to postseason hockey's increased intensity and reduced space. The salary cap implications extend beyond Karlsson himself. Major trades often create ripple effects throughout the roster, forcing teams to make additional moves that can either strengthen or weaken the overall lineup. Toronto's limited financial flexibility means that acquiring Karlsson could prevent them from addressing other needs or retaining key players in future seasons. As this saga continues to unfold, several factors will determine whether fantasy becomes reality. Pittsburgh's motivation level appears genuine. They're a team in transition looking to retool around their remaining core players. This creates the kind of seller's market that can favor aggressive buyers like Toronto. The Mitch Marner situation adds urgency to any Karlsson discussions. If Toronto decides to trade their star winger, they'll need to replace his offensive production somehow. Karlsson represents one of the few available players capable of providing similar point production, albeit from a different position. Brad Treliving's track record suggests he's not afraid to make bold moves when he believes they'll improve his team's championship chances. The question becomes whether he views Karlsson as a missing piece or a luxury the team can't afford given other pressing needs. As training camp approaches and roster decisions loom, the Karlsson saga represents everything that makes NHL trade speculation both thrilling and frustrating. The potential upside is enormous, a generational talent joining a team desperate for playoff success. The risks are equally significant. Major assets and cap space committed to a player whose best years might be behind him. For Toronto fans, this represents the kind of crossroads that defines franchise direction. Do they want their team to swing for the fences in pursuit of championship glory, or should they prioritize steady, conservative improvement? Both approaches have merit, but only one will ultimately prove correct. The coming weeks will reveal whether Jay Rosehill's confident, all-day assessment reflects organizational thinking or merely represents one analyst's bold prediction. Either way, the hockey world will be watching closely as one of the NHL's most intriguing trade scenarios plays out in real time. So, what's your take on this potential blockbuster? Should the Leafs go all in on Karlsson? Or is this exactly the kind of risky move that could derail their championship hopes? The debate is raging everywhere from social media to sports bars, and we want to hear your voice in the mix. Drop your thoughts in the comments below and smash that like button if you're as captivated by this trade drama as we are.